Alright, hello everybody. We're off Adderall, but that's okay. We're gonna do our damnedest. Hi! Hello. Hope you all are doing well. My name is Cthulhu. For those who don't know me, hello. I'm a streamer, content creator, artist, polymer clay sculptor, Pokemon Infinite Fusion sprite designer, poet, award-winning college journalist. But most importantly for today, I am an avid contributor to the SCP Wiki, a large collaborative fiction project focused around the fictional SCP Foundation, which is a secret, shadowy organization that focuses on procuring and locking up anomalous things. People, places, phenomena, time periods. It can be anything. I have written 3 SCPs, I've written 4 tales. I am also a big fan of discussing what makes SCP work from a literary perspective, because it's writing, it's pieces of literature at the end of the day, and I feel like there's not much out there talking about what makes SCP work from an actual writing perspective, and I think that's a shame, because it's a very new phenomenon. It only started in 2007, one that's uniquely possible because of the internet, and, you know, what does this format, this clinical format, and the fact that it's so collaborative, what effect does that have on the kinds of stories that are being told? So, today, this is probably not going to be a super long stream, just so y'all know. It's also probably not going to be one where you come away going, oh, okay, I understand everything there is to know about this thing. But this is more so meant as a general overview of this concept and showing you sort of how it's mutated and evolved over time, and especially how different authors have taken it and spun it in their own specific ways. So, D-Class, Class D, Disposable Class, is and has been a very, very divisive topic on the wiki from the jump, basically. So for those who don't know, essentially, and we'll get more in depth on this later, the Foundation contains all these things that threaten normalcy. In order to do so, sometimes they have to use test subjects. Sometimes they have to use human test subjects. And early on, it was decided that, generally speaking, these test subjects would be taken from the prison population. Generally, death row inmates was the idea. And they would be told that they would get their freedom after a month of testing, and then usually, at least early on, terminated at the end of the month. Killed and replaced. And this idea has faced a lot of blowback, understandably so, because it is utterly reprehensible from a moral perspective, but also from a logistical one. It just doesn't quite work out, because there's just not that many death row inmates on Earth, especially given the over 8,000 anomalies the Foundation contains and how many bodies they need to throw at some of those. It just doesn't add up. So, other authors have taken this as kind of a challenge and done their own things with Class D, which we will get into shortly. First, I should zoom in probably. Yeah, okay. So, this is from a page called The Origin of Object Classes. It goes in depth about, specifically, Safe Euclid Keter, but it also mentions here, the Keter class comes from this era. The earliest example I could find is from a January 19th, 2008 post about a Keter-level object. The SCP noted that Keter objects were supposed to be handled by D-Class. This post contains the earliest reference to monthly D-class terminations that I've been able to find, which we can see here. Class D personnel are designated staff used to handle the Keter level objects. Class D staff are sequestered on the Keter floor, bottom basement. Not allowed to interact with Class D personnel assigned to a different object or personnel. They're recruited from prison inmates. Condemned persons are preferred. In times of duress, Protocol 12 can be authorized, allowing recruitment of innocents or persons incarcerated for lesser crimes. All Class D personnel must be terminated at the first of the month, and a new staff must be ready to replace them. So, on January 19, 2008, this idea of monthly termination and the introduction of the idea of Protocol 12, where if there's not enough inmates, the Foundation can just start recruiting from anywhere, basically, but especially emphasis is placed later on refugees, political prisoners, basically anyone who's not going to be missed is the basic idea. Now some of you are probably already like, oh, this is unconscionable. Yes. Now, early on, you can see here, other tips, don't refer to, okay, if you use subject, make sure you don't confuse the reader, because subject usually refers to experiment subjects, like D-class personnel or people involuntarily exposed to SCPs. These are all from early in the wiki. And there's several mentions. This is stuff that was transferred over from the Edit This wiki, the first version of the wiki. 12 Class D personnel are assigned to test the effects of the door. Basically, anytime the Foundation needs lab rats to just throw at an anomaly and figure out what it does, they use Class D. Which is interesting. A choice that was made. You also have this, secure clearance levels. This is outdated, but yeah. This one is very similar to the wording on that 4chan post. Not permitted to interact with... Yep, so almost word for word. Are to be terminated at the first of the month, and new staff must be ready to replace them. So yes. They basically putting this into place as the general precedent. Though, of course, there being no canon, very quickly people start to have their own ideas about it. And just early on in the wiki, it's basically the cruelty is the point with Class D. Basically just people wanted to show just how inhuman and horrifically cold and callous the Foundation was, and they often did that by just showing a large body count. So SCP-120, it's a little swimming pool that every time someone goes through it, it leads to somewhere different in a set order of 12 places. This one, it's on it's in the Himalayan mountain range. They dug an 8-meter hole for disposal of D-class bodies. D-class personnel used for dialing, basically to get to the next location, are to be injected with a mixture of sedatives and neurotoxin before sending to ensure a humane death and decrease risk of damage to the structures at location 4. So they basically just send a body in to die so they can get to the different locations. You also see something interesting here. The Chaos Insurgency, I think I've mentioned once or twice before. It's a group of interest on the wiki, basically meant as a foil to the Foundation. They are a splinter group, as you can see. The rogue group that went AWOL. Not a whole lot has been done with the Insurgency recently, which is a shame. I think there is potential. But immediately writers are like, oh, we need to distinguish, we need to make the Foundation's use of Class D personnel not seem so bad. So, it makes use of authoritarian regimes and poor and developing countries, often using their populations in the same manner as the Foundation does D-class personnel. It helps to maintain the extreme poverty and war that is suffered by these countries so that it can continue its radical experimentation, easy conscription of forces, and lucrative business deals with various opposing factions. Basically, they're saying, hey, yeah, well, you think the Foundation's bad, wait till you see what this other group is doing. To be like, well, it could always be worse, see? At least we're not the Insurgency, which is... Listen. you can, I don't know. It's different. It's a writing technique. It's not my favorite writing technique in the world. I'm not a huge fan of the, well, yeah, but it could always be worse. Like, it's just not really my favorite thing in the world. And that feels like half the reason the Chaos Insurgency was created, is to be like, well, at least we're not those guys. Which, granted, some people have actually taken that to be the in-fiction justification for them, is that they don't really exist. They're a rumor concocted by the Foundation to keep people in line. Which is interesting. It's not I don't dislike that idea. But, yeah, not my favorite. The Chaos Insurgency in general is just kind of poorly developed anyway, but that's neither here nor there. You see people already likening D-class experience to things like slavery. I've talked about this article before, 1851EX, which does a great job of comparing the experience of enslaved persons before and during the Civil War, and likening that to the D-class experience, basically showing that the Foundation used these enslaved persons, these escaped people, as test subjects, and was absolutely complicit in their enslavement. So this is leaning more into the idea of like, hey, this is a really fucked up thing. So here's something you gotta understand, right? SCP started on 4chan. It started on the paranormal board of 4chan. In that time, and somewhat still to this day, but especially at that time, there was a desire to make your thing, your story, the edgiest, the darkest, the coolest out of all the stories. And in my humble opinion, I think that the entire idea of Class Ds, and especially the idea of monthly termination, grew out of that. It came from a desire for the Foundation to seem as callous and cold as possible. And there have been stories since that have tried to make the point of like, oh, well, no, we have to. I think that's putting lipstick on a pig a little bit. Because at the end of the day, I think people made these concepts to show that the Foundation is kind of irredeemable. And so, I don't know. It's interesting. But I just, at its core, the concept of Class D is hard to redeem, hard to justify. As you can see, we get other uses of Class D. We get a little more nuance here, not just treating them as completely disposable. In this case, part of this anomaly's containment, I talked about this during the format screw episode. In this case, the Class D is part of the containment of this thing, and in fact is used as the smoke screen. They are convincing everyone else in the Foundation that he is the anomaly. 1983 is actually neutralized by a D-class, where we get mention of the Foundation star, this merit that is given to a D-class, of course only after his death. After their death, excuse me. But yes, it still, there's this sense of detachment of like, oh, they died to save us. It's like, but you couldn't have treated them well when they were alive? Okay. Birthday Every Day is one of my favorite tales on the wiki. We start to get a lot more point of view stories from the perspective of D-class personnel. So this one is with SCP-871, which is a Keter class anomaly, a set of cakes that if you don't eat them, they would potentially multiply exponentially. So they need someone to eat them every day. And so Andrew Keeps eating, eating. Andy. Yeah, Andrew ate the cake again with no complaint. The cake from the day before. Why am I doing this? Yeah, still just making a point of, like, the treatment of them as just materials, basically. That's none of your concern. That's none of your concern. Now eat. He's just trying, you know, even the D-class are trying to strike up conversation. I have a lot of cake to eat every day. You must eat. I was happy to not have an entire cake to eat. The man did not speak any English. 2886 got tired of the cake. Continued to eat, but watch the exchange with interest. Grabbed the cake and threw it in the man's face, and then a new cake appeared. And then the guy kills the other D-class who threw the cake. Because it's a Keter class, I guess. It seems like an extreme reaction, but whatever. Each day was a new name on the cake. Other inmates came and went with varying degrees of enthusiasm, but Andrew always stayed. Perhaps they knew he would eat the cake by himself if he had to. He always ate the cake, and never further did he complain. One day, Andrew was escorted into the room at the table. The man seemed a little different. A bit of a smile graced the sides of his mouth as he presented the plate. On it was a cake bearing the words, Happy Bar Mitzvah, Stephen. The man also presented him with a gallon of milk and, for the first time, a cup of coffee. This is different, Andrew remarked, cutting a spoonful of cake out of the molded dessert. The man shrugged. I've been told you're being kept around a while. You should consider yourself lucky. Most of the time I get rid of you guys. I should mention that I hate cake. Cake's keeping you alive. Well, then I hope I don't get diabetes. The cake tasted terrible. So, this one's interesting, because it also makes the point, you know, the man is told they're being around for a while. Now he starts to relax. Which begs the question, are the Foundation people cold because they genuinely view D-Class as disposable and not human? Or is that treatment of them to prevent themselves from developing an attachment? Do they try to force themselves to think this so that they won't be as horrified by the idea of termination? Which is an interesting ethical dilemma. It's an interesting question, and one that only came about a little bit later, but it's interesting. I don't hate that idea in and of itself. Oh, man, I pushed my camera. Lovely. Okay. Then you start to get people actively questioning these ideas. This is in a revised version of the security clearance levels document. This is a writing guide section. Originally thought to have been named such because D stands for disposable, Class D personnel are one of the longest running and oft-times most controversial traditions. When first conceived, Class D personnel were suggested to be killed off at the end of every month. This is highly implausible when the sheer number of Class D personnel used by the Foundation is considered, as there aren't enough death row inmates worldwide to support this kind of waste of human life. Since then, many people have taken to believe that the policy of mandatory monthly termination is disinformation, meant to reduce any sort of emotional attachment between research personnel and Class Ds. Many people believe that Class D personnel are simply mind-wiped at the end of every month and transferred elsewhere. The new model goes even further, suggesting that while amnestics are regularly used, Class D personnel are only killed off if they are no longer healthy or sane enough to perform work. Some authors believe in even more fantastic explanations, such as the use of cloning or even anomalous means in maintaining a D-class population. It is entirely up to you as an author what you choose to believe or use in your writing. Protocol 12 is a rarely mentioned operational guideline that states that if the Foundation absolutely requires it, individuals that normally aren't eligible for induction as Class D personnel may be obtained. It goes without saying that excessive mention of Protocol 12 is detrimental to the overarching Foundation narrative. The Foundation may go to extreme lengths and cross some very gray lines to protect humanity, but they do not needlessly waste human life, especially innocent life. This is where you get this argument of the fact, one of the running themes of a lot of SCP writing is that the Foundation is cold, not cruel. And to a lot of people, killing every single D class at the end of every month is a hard pill to swallow. That is just not something that can really be classed in that cold, not cruel thing. Because why is it necessary? When they have mind-wiping drugs, when they have the means to clone, why is this monthly termination something that's actually necessary or beneficial to the Foundation? And there's not really a good answer. So you get people now starting to do their own thing with it. We get a D-class contest in 2016. Basically the whole idea being, general consensus is that D-class are a plot device. They're part of the site that is rarely looked at too deeply. Readers know practically nothing about these key cogs in the Foundation machine. The goal is to shed some light on the D-class. You may be interested in discussing the origins of the classification, the everyday lives of personnel who are assigned to it, or the attitudes towards them held by the rest of the Foundation. There is an endless wealth of possible perspectives and concepts to explore. And boy, did they explore. There's a lot of entries here. The winning entry being 2439, which we also discussed in the Format Screws episode. Basically, this is one that D-class know about that the rest of the Foundation does not. It's some sort of mind-corrupting thing, and they know if it got its hands on Foundation minds, it would quickly take over the world, and it would be catastrophic for all of humanity. So they keep it written down in this room that doesn't have cameras in it, so that they can talk about it and figure out plans, coordinate things, to keep the rest of the Foundation from knowing about it. This is one of my favorite one of these. One of my favorite format screws, because it absolutely humanizes D-class and gives them the one thing that's like, they actually know about it, and the rest of the Foundation does not. They have a secret. Some of the other entries, 2959, this one describes the entire idea of D-class as anomalous, which is a little bit of a get-out-of-jail-free card, but it's not a broken idea. Anomalous effect occurs when a Foundation employee interacts with an instance. Foundation employees who are infected view them as human test subjects. Despite previous moral character or aversion toward violence, personnel infected engage in or otherwise support experiments utilizing the instances and other objects, normally result in death or otherwise grievous harm being inflicted upon the instance. Most experiments offer little scientific merit and achieve no greater understanding of the object. Affected personnel's disinterest toward the lives and comfort of instances grows over prolonged contact. So again, this is a very different characterization of the Foundation, obviously. Not really meant to be the actual through line, probably. But it's an interesting one. This is probably the most famous piece having to do with monthly termination. Because this posits that the idea of monthly termination is the anomaly. It's not real. It's an infohazardous anomaly affecting the documentation for items and entities in the Foundation database. It often appears in the object's special containment procedures or addenda and references an operation referred to as the monthly termination of Class D personnel. No evidence for the initial adoption or implementation of such a policy exists in any Foundation records, as verified by Records and Information Security Administration investigation into all prior O5 mandates and that resolutions. I don't know what that is. It's automatically inserted into a random digital SCP slot at regular intervals. The method by which it is generated is unknown. Individuals who are exposed are subjected to a mimetic effect where they fully believe the monthly termination of Class D personnel to be a valid operation. This belief can be easily spread through any and all forms of communication solely by containing the phrase monthly termination. Uninfected personnel who possess doubt or suspicion are able to be overcome with simple rhetoric supporting the policy. The infected continue to operate as if it has always been a Foundation-held policy, and there is a noted lack of cognitive dissonance when presented with conflicting information. Aside from the excessive expenditure of Class D personnel, sites and individuals infected are able to perform their duties exceptionally, and without undue complications. The first known document to host it has been removed from the database and is undergoing review from the Foundation Counter-Conceptual Division. No internal documentation or instructions exist that detail the actual process. Regardless, infected individuals and departments operate and terminate Class D personnel in a uniform manner. Remote observation of sites have discovered from affected sites prior... Sorry. Oh, this is interesting when I'm not on my Adderall. Remote observation of sites blank and blank, as well as security footage from affected sites prior to its discovery, have revealed the monthly termination process. On the final day of the month, testing is suspended on any SCPs which would involve Class D testing. Approximately one-third of the site's resident Class D population will start facing their cell doors. They're fully compliant and cooperative throughout the entirety of the process. It should be noted that they will still verbally assault and threaten nearby personnel. A sufficient detachment of security personnel will arrive to escort the Class D in a single file line throughout the facility. Though the guards will be armed, no restraints are placed on the Class D. Researchers Level 0 and other personnel not directly involved in the process will avoid the path the officers/Class D follow. This is perfectly choreographed despite the lack of planning /forewarning. The Class D will be led to a point outside the facility and taken to an area that is not covered by surveillance systems. Hidden cameras sewn into the guards' uniforms have been intentionally obscured, including in cases where they have no foreknowledge of the camera's existence. Subdermal tracking implants on the Class D cease functioning. The security guards return to the facility. The officers will claim to have terminated the Class D via their sidearms. To date, they've all returned without a single discharged round. It was discovered by AIAD, an AI system, after its initial upload to Site-17. It was undergoing an event which the AI observed through the surveillance system. It attempted to contact then Site Director, as the AI interpreted the procedure as illogical and without precedent, as communications were disregarded. The AI correctly deduced the presence of a mimetic effect, began the process of removing it throughout the site's backup digital files, as well as every entry of the main database accessible by personnel. It completed the process before the D-Class had been removed from their cells and disabled the door's electronic locks. Dietrich M. Lurk was contacted by Site-17 security chief, who requested his assistance in disabling the AI system override. D. Lurk investigated the situation and finding the AI to be acting in accordance with standard principles, instead alerted MTF 8 of 10. Site-17, along with 12 other sites, had to be quarantined and their corresponding records wiped of 2193-1. Provisional Site Blank and Observation Site Blank were exempted for testing purposes. Provisional Site Blank underwent an event. During the transport, behavioral changes were noted in both the detainees and the guards. The Class D repeatedly expressed concern over their fate, while the guards apologized profusely. The following is an excerpt taken from Agent Eason's head cam as the event reached its conclusion. The group approaches a rounded clearing in the woods 2 kilometers south of the site. The Class D continued directly towards the clearing's center. The guards branch out and form a ring around the group. This formation is congruous with previous observations. The guards around the Class D's perimeter turn away from the group and obscure their headcams, excluding Agent Eason. Agent Eason, indecipherable due to sudden interference, presumably not again. D-1920 lifts vertically and hovers in place 0.3 meters off the ground. D-1920 continues upward at an estimated speed of 35,000 kilometers per hour. D-1823 begins to hover. This process repeats for each present D-class. Neither provisional site blank nor orbital assets were able to view this phenomenon, despite the fact that the area was covered by the surveillance systems of each. They are taken individually. Agent Yeason watches the final Class D depart and fixates on the full moon. The moon appears to blink. Agent Yeason begins to run. In the background, the other guards can be seen remaining in their position. Agent Yeason is lifted in a manner similar to the Class D. Camera feed cuts as the agent reaches the stratosphere. Upon questioning, the guards asserted that Agent Yeason had been attacked by the Class D and that he had been killed in the resulting altercation. So, this is interesting, because, again, it's not necessarily meant to replace the idea of monthly termination. Rather, it's SD Lock's own spin on the idea. And I'm a fan, I like it. I don't know if I headcanon it, but it's an interesting one. The idea that this is some sort of deity that's abducting D-Class and possessing Foundation employees, using them to do it. Why, we don't know. How, we don't really know either. Again, it doesn't really fix the idea of monthly termination. Rather, it's just sort of its own take. And it makes the Foundation seem a lot less complicit, which, your mileage may vary. But then we get to the more modern takes on Class D. A lot more care has been taken, generally speaking, to humanize them. In 5031, for instance, which is a great article, I talked about it in my Keter does not equal dangerous video. But as you go, and a Class D introduced to enclosure, it starts playing with it. Stood behind the subjects, engaged in a game of catch. We're not going to read all of it, obviously. Vocabulary. The D class instructed to demonstrate drawing. The D class is instructed to play chopsticks. The D class teaches it how to cook. So basically, when they first introduced this test subject, it's meant like we don't know exactly what this thing does. It might be dangerous. Turns out this thing ends up becoming the D class's student, kind of. Its child to a certain extent. So he shows it various recipes. Said its first word. 3-course meal over Thanksgiving. Let me see. I forget if this one... Yeah, only engages with art and music when accompanied, but it continues to be preoccupied with food preparation even when alone. The D class has volunteered to taste test. So yeah, this one absolutely does a great job of humanizing this D class as compared to a lot of early articles. You also have this piece, which is more so meant to be like an in-universe piece of world building. This is the Ethics Committee's regulations for housing D class. So, they will be provided with cafeteria, library, recreational area. So, Classification 1, they are anomalous, are required for the continued testing. So, as mentioned, for 5031, or neutralization of an object, or has extremely valuable physical and mental qualities. These Class D are permitted to have access to many extended luxuries and only must sleep in their bunks area with other Class D during night hours. They are allowed continued access to supervised luxury areas as well as, such as recreational areas and libraries. 2. High value. They possess rare physical or mental qualities valuable for research or have shown constant and continued compliance and helpfulness to the Foundation's research. Extended access to luxuries such as libraries and recreation areas. Class 3, they're not no extra-normal properties, but they don't have any non-compliance risk. They're permitted to have access to limited luxuries and are subject to standard on-site routines and guidelines. And then Class 4, highly dangerous and has a history of continued non-compliance and danger. Not permitted access to any luxuries and are only removed from containment for testing on or recontainment of high-risk subjects, like 106, where they shatter the D-Class's femur so that they scream enough that 106 comes back. Isn't it fun? I like this more because it adds a little more nuance to it. Obviously, you can't just paint all D-Class with the same broad brush. They're going to have different values, and especially in the case of something like 5031, you want to keep that D-Class alive. You want to keep him here so that he can continue to aid in containment of 5031. Need to be repaired and cleaned in a timely manner. If they refuse testing, they should not be physically forced as a first option. They should receive 5 seconds to comply before termination. Repeated non-compliant D-Class can be moved down to Class 4. They should not be spoken to. This is a big change from the early Foundation. Should not be spoken to as being inferior, non-human, objects, guinea pigs, or other dehumanizing terms. Should be reminded that Class D are not subhuman or inferior, but essential to the Foundation's goal of research. They should not be verbally abused in any other way. Class D above Class 4 are allowed to speak to on-site ethics committee members, personnel enforcing the Code of Ethics, or make reports about personnel they believe to be violating the Code of Ethics. They should not be beaten, injured, or physically restrained unless they are posing a threat to other personnel. Torture and purposeful methods at mental damage are absolutely forbidden unless necessary for containment. In the event a facility requires modifications to these guidelines, a request can be submitted to the Board of Ethics. Below are guidelines for various types of sites. They should never have knowledge of any contained SCPs unless required for testing. Containment areas should be monitored for potential info breaches. No personnel are allowed in except for authorized security personnel. It can be recruited from the following situations should they be completely compliant in joining. Should not be told about the Foundation or anything anomalous until they have agreed to join. Homeless shelters, hotspots, where they will be offered $80,000 for each year of work. Prisons, where they will be offered time reduced from their sentence. Death row prisons, where they will be offered the possibility of reduction to 15-year sentence, depending on crimes, in exchange for 5 to 10 years' work with the Foundation. Low-income cities, same procedures with homeless. Prisoners of war, locations heavily dependent on Foundation relations with holding country. Holding country will be paid in exchange for the prisoner for 1 to 5 years of work, then released. Captured members of hostile groups of interest. Recruiters within correctional facilities should be under constant escort, etc., etc. In the event of a lockdown, all Class D are to be immediately returned to their cells. Class D that refuse to enter may be terminated without warning. D-Class containment areas placed on lockdown until the emergency is concluded. D-Class containment areas to be placed under guard of personnel, etc. So in this case, it's both a little bit better with the nuance here, saying if a D-Class is cooperative, if they're helpful, if they're doing everything right, they should be allowed amenities. They should be, whatever. At the same time, it's saying we're going to recruit homeless people or low-income people, and if they don't cooperate, we'll just throw them into recontainment of high-risk anomalies. So it's like, the more things change, the more they stay the same, basically, is how I would describe the way D-Class as a concept has changed. And there's still mentions of D-Class every once in a while, like in this article written by my friend I Am the Uga, that bring D-Class into the fold. Monthly termination, in general, has fallen mostly by the wayside. You don't see a lot of mentions of monthly termination anymore. It seems like the broadly popular idea is that D-Class have their memories wiped at the end of every month and are moved to a new anomaly, unless, of course, they're needed for the specific containment of one anomaly, like the D-Class that was teaching 5031 how to cook and such. But it's still a gray area, obviously, intentionally so originally. And it's definitely one of the things about the SCP Wiki that remains one of the biggest hallmarks of the early creepypasta 4chan days. I have never used D-Class in any of my articles. I don't even think in any of my tales, actually. It is possible. You can write anomalies that don't necessitate the use of D-Class. Sometimes, depending on the story you're telling, they can be useful, but you have to tread lightly to not just make them kind of stereotypical. Like SCP-087 has some pretty bad examples of them just being treated like lab rats. It's a great article, but it definitely hasn't aged well in that regard. It's a thing. It's a gray area. I don't have a lot of answers. Like I said, there's going to be a short one and not going to give you a whole lot of answers. I mostly just wanted to give you an overview of how the concept has evolved over time. I don't know if this would make any sense. I'll rewatch it after I've taken my Adderall, and we'll see if it's anything close to sensical. But we'll see. That's pretty much going to do it for us. I don't have much else to say, so let's find somebody to raid, and when we do, I'll say thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, please feel free to, if you're on YouTube, like this video, comment, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications. If you're on Twitch, feel free to give me a follow and share the stream with your friends. I have a Discord server down below. It's where I post my stream and upload schedules. I also have a link to a spreadsheet with a list of all the games I've played on stream and links to the VOD playlists for each. You can find me on Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. You can find my Etsy shop if you like polymer clay figurines or beads or things of that nature. You can find my WordPress blog if you want to read my ramblings. You can find my Patreon if you want to support me directly. And, of course, you can find my SCP Wiki author page, Cthulhu Corner, if you want to read some of my SCP articles, which do not have D-Class in them. And I don't plan to use D-Class anytime soon, but we'll see. So yeah, we're going to be rating Nosferatu in just a second. So hang tight, and I'll see y'all later. Bye!
Damn, Meryl looks great.